So apparently it's Men's Mental Health Month, I think it might be. Someone said.
Okay.
I got a message this morning from somebody saying that. So I thought, give it a mention.
We need to get a calendar of all the
events.
day is, what's the thing of the week, what's the thing of the month. But that's an important one, that. I mean, there's usually a mental health awareness day or week, isn't there, in part of the year? But this one is particularly about men's mental health.
Men's mental health. I know you have Movember, don't you? In November.
Yeah, that's
the old
men's
moustache.
Yeah, is that to do with prostate
Also
cancer or just
cancer.
generally men's health things?
But I think it's men's mental health, and obviously it's a big issue.
Yeah, well, we're taking that a lot more seriously as a country, aren't we? But we are as a company too.
Yeah. So we
talk about it a bit more. In fact, last year when the health insurance renewal came around, I added on the employee assistance program, which includes the counselling. You can either over the phone or in person.
Yeah.
People can just use that confidentially. I think that's important.
Well, as Bob Hoskins says, you know what's coming. It's good to talk.
Is that as far as your Bob Hoskins impersonation goes?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't know anything else. Well,
you have to rewatch Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I watched that as a child, and I must say, elicited some confusing feelings.
About a rabbit.
About a rabbit. And was it Jennifer Rabbit? She was a human, wasn't she? I can't remember the name.
No, I think she was the cartoon, wasn't she?
Was she? I thought
the first ever cartoon and live action film that came out.
I bet it looks terrible now, but I imagine of its day. I think I remember going to the cinema to watch it.
Wow.
That's a very archaic practice nowadays, isn't it?
Gosh, it's one of those conversations that goes from men's mental health to Bob Hoskins to confused feelings about animated rabbits.
Yeah.
And the next step in that. Maybe we better stop the chain there before it gets a bit too unsavoury.
As you can see, speaking of mental health.
Yes. You need to go and have a chat.
But no, serious thing. I guess there's lots of things online you can look at, but
yeah, I just thought it'd be nice to do another guest podcast on that, because who was the guest you had before?
Lisa,
yeah, she was really good.
She did a lot of I can't remember what episode that was, but on stress in general for men and women, but just it was around how to manage stress in the workplace. And
I think we can put a pound to a penny that nearly everyone listening is in a senior position in a company, has at some time experienced a mental health episode, even if they just brushed it off as being, it's a bit stressful at the moment, or I'm having a down day. We've adapted our language a bit more these days.
I think years ago, we all kind of just sucked it up. I mean, I had serious stress at work in my previous life.
Well, you opened up about that. If anybody wants to hear details, there's that episode.
Go listen to the podcast. Look for the one with Lisa Gunn, and that's the episode. But you just kind of suck it up, and I think there is a tendency that if you've been through something like that, you say to yourself, "Well, I sucked it up. Why can't everybody else?" But it's probably not very healthy. So episode
53 was your episode with Lisa Gunn. Yeah, very good episode. That thank you for that.
So stay healthy. Talk to people, and listen as well. If someone's talking, you've got to listen. It's a two-way thing, isn't it? So.
Well, you've done your public service there, Rich. Well done. Spread the word.
There you go. Spread the word.
Excellent. Should we do a podcast?
We should do.
And not get too... Well, let's do a podcast. Hello and welcome again to the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. Every week we try and come up with something useful or interesting for owners and managers of small and medium-sized enterprises, and hopefully this week is no exception. With me as ever is Rich. Hi Rich.
Hello.
Here we are again in the hot seats. It's amazing how fast a week comes round. Another podcast.
Here we go.
Think of something else
scheduled in.
To say.
Pete's scheduled us in. Keeps us on our...
Pete's very good. Pete's over there in the control room. Hi Pete.
He keeps us...
He keeps our levels balanced in more ways than one. Looks after us. So we had to think about what to do today, and hopefully if you've seen this podcast on the list of podcasts, you'll have a bit of a clue as to what we're talking about, which is to do with the amount of R&D small and medium-sized companies either do or should do. Put that into context. Talk about big companies, got a bit of an update on Google, and also give some experiences from our own company.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that prompted this when we're thinking about what should we talk about is, well, two things really. One, we tend to do quite a lot of R&D just as part of our nature.
I think it's in our DNA.
It's in our DNA. And two, I was reading an article this week around what's happening with Google's X Labs, or their Moonshot Lab, where due to kind of ongoing pressure from ChatGPT and just other financial pressures, they are looking at potentially divesting some of their, or turning some of the initiatives into companies and spinning them off and reducing the spend in that area.
Well, it's quite interesting you were saying what's triggered that. So let's go into that and let's talk about our own.
Yeah.
Just do our quick précis at the beginning, like we do, of recent episodes.
Oh, yeah.
For those of you that have come into this one afresh, maybe this is the first time you've listened to Richard and I. So welcome if you are a new listener. The last 3 episodes we did. Now, last week has triggered a bit of debate. That was a challenge to all business owners and senior leaders to ask them how much are they really seriously looking into using AI, but across the breadth of their business. So we went through every department in a business, came up with 5 potential projects, and we challenged business owners to say, how much have you gone to each of your department heads and said, what are you doing? What projects have you got on at the moment to explore either the threat posed by or the opportunities presented by AI? So that was last week. That was episode 72. Episode 71 was around board reports, which turned out surprisingly interesting, although maybe
surprised us all, that one.
Yeah.
Yes, but that was a request from somebody, wanted to know off the back of our board meetings.
Yeah.
Chairing 3,000 board meetings podcast, we had a request to talk about how we would construct a board report.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole podcast dedicated to
just that.
How you write a board report.
And that was for Matt. Well done, Matt. And then the one before that, episode 70, was intrapreneurship, which I still struggle with, in-house startups. And we've got some experiences and we've seen companies, clients of ours do that sort of thing. So we talked about that. And I'll only mention the one before that, which is breaking the rule of 3 by 1, because we're going to come back to it again today. But in episode 69, we talked about Performance Max, the new newish Google Ads type advertising methodology, which uses AI and allows you in theory to pay per conversion rather than pay per click. So we're going to refer back to that today. So they were the last few episodes we did. So sorry, back to the state. I interrupted you very rudely to get
so
our
I forgot that we do the last three episodes. But tying it in seamlessly, they're shutting down the Moonshot Lab at Google, but given what we've spent on Performance Max, I can't see why they should be.
We've funded them enough. I'll pay for them a couple of years.
That's the segue back into it.
Yeah.
So I was reading this article around what's going on with Google. Obviously, they've got this threat now, ChatGPT, AI, people using that to search rather than traditional Google searches. We
talked about that, didn't we? When ChatGPT was, it must have been a few months ago in an episode, we said, why would people ever search for stuff on Google now?
Yeah.
Because you get a list of things you then have to go and curate your own answer from. Get the robot to do it for you.
Yeah.
So Google, you won't be Googling stuff anymore. You'll be whatever the verb is from ChatGPT-ing it.
So the philosophy around Google, and we'll probably bring this into our discussion later, was around that whole 20% of the time of employees could be spent on passion projects or innovation. Yeah. That sort of spun itself out.
Just explain that a bit, because I think it's reasonably well known, but we've talked about it before. Maybe not everybody is totally familiar. So
I think it was part of the ethos of the company was to encourage innovation and encourage people to follow their kind of passions and come up with ideas. And out of that, we had things like Gmail. That was a project that, it's not necessarily related to search, but that was the core business, obviously. And then there's other ones like Google Maps and things like that, all came out of people saying, right, I'm interested in having a bit of a noodle around on this or whatever. And what Google did was kind of institutionalize the R&D element of the company to say, well, we'll give employees 20% of their time, a day a week, to work on these kind of projects. And I suppose over time you've got clever people doing things and they're all able to build off each other's, stand on the shoulder of giants type of thing. And that has resulted in various different projects, some of which we know very well, like Gmail and things like that. But then they had a lab, which was called X, which is now probably more associated with the likes of Twitter and Elon Musk, or their Moonshot Lab, where they took these projects and tried to... Is
that where they did things like self-driving cars and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think
not
that's
just
coming out of
to do with the core business.
And the things like putting weather balloons up to try and put satellites on to remote comms and that type of thing. So all kind of like wacky ideas. There was really no kind of budget constraints on it, no kind of...
It was seen as a real benefit of working for Google, wasn't it? That you almost counted it as like you'd count your holidays. You think, but we also get 20% of our time, just do whatever we want.
Yeah. So I guess it encouraged that type of person to join the organisation, isn't it? So
It
it's
strikes me as kind of an academia type ethos. Imagine if you could just turn
Yeah.
up for a day a week, you just, what should we noodle around with today?
Yeah.
Or there's that project I've got on.
and I guess you've got all the tools of people developing software, people do I guess it's a great kind of melting pot there of
Yeah.
ideas and things. But as they became Alphabet and shareholders and things, there was kind of an increasing view of like, how much is this all costing? Because before it was just like, no budget, chuck the money in. So apparently they had a line in the accounts that said other bets. That was the
Great
line. It's always
yeah.
great when you get a line in the accounts. We've been there before.
Yeah.
Have our own little line. Thank you very much. But it's increasingly now under pressure because of the threat of ChatGPT. And so they're starting to think about, well, how do we divest some of these ideas, turn them into companies, spin them off as startups, because the focus is now on how do we, I guess they've got so big they've got to protect the
It's
core
such
business.
a shame, isn't it, in a way? Maybe the inevitable, but 20% is a hell of a lot.
It's a lot.
And I guess while they were making so much money hand over fist, it was just a luxury they could afford.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show how spooked they've been then by the fact that there's a threat to their core business model, which is search and the advertising that comes from search.
Well, if you think for years, decades even, really, there's not been another, they've been the apex predator, haven't they, really?
Well, there's a market share of search. Is it still something like 80% or something?
Crazy. But I suppose what that has inspired us to think about, and what, well, not think about, but do really, we've always had that sort of, my background, scientist, yours is engineer.
Yeah.
We're kind of pre-programmed to...
We're always fiddling. We're
Yeah.
trying to make new things or break things or work out how they work.
So
So that's what we wanted to talk a bit about today.
Yeah.
It's what you just talked about, though, does remind me a little bit of the story of my first ever employer, which was a British-based manufacturing company, but had factories all over the world, so they're kind of a multinational more than a global, perhaps. But they had a philosophy that 1% of everybody's turnover would have to be paid to the R&D centre, which was over near Rugby, in a village called Corston, which is what I was employed by. And because it was regarded as a tax, and all the operating companies, they kind of begrudgingly paid it. But every now and again, a great innovation came out of it, and they all benefited from it.
Yeah.
That's what I was employed by. So similar sort of philosophy, but 1% is perhaps a bit more affordable than 20%.
Yeah. My background, I did a lot of R&D projects for like contact lenses. So if anyone's wearing a particular brand of contact lens, I'll leave you to guess which one it might be. Then some of the work that I did in a previous life went into that. So there's a whole, R&D is in our, as you say, in our DNA.
One of our clients has worked with a contact lens manufacturer. And apparently when the optician tells you that they have to measure the shape of your eyeball so you get a good fit, apparently it's a bit of kidology, because the world is divided into two shapes of eyeballs, the Western world and the Asian world. We've each got different sizes, but within each of those worlds, you're all the same.
I can bore you ad nauseum about contact lenses.
Okay, time
so
to move on. Okay. Well, back to what we said we'd do then, which is to reflect on a few of our own R&D projects, just as much as anything else, to give an update to listeners, because we drop them into conversation as we're going through. So how are we getting on? And the first one is what we just talked about, which was a previous episode, Performance Max. Yeah. There's a story building over time. Must be a month then, mustn't it, since we first decided to throw our first £1 million at that. Maybe not quite.
Performance Min, I think, might be.
Yeah. So what we actually found is the mechanism definitely works. You can definitely trust it to maximize conversions. The problem you've got is to make sure that they're conversions that you want.
Yep.
And there's lots of little settings hidden away, which they hope you don't find, so that it can fire even more traffic to your website that gets conversions, which maybe you wouldn't want. So you've got to make sure you correctly select the countries, but not just people who are interested in the country, but people who are actually resident in the country.
And we had a few false starts with it as well, didn't we? So we've had to start the experiments over because we were getting quite a lot of spam come through.
Yeah, a lot.
And that was training the model, AI model.
So it learned to do more of that. Because we were giving it the reward by saying that's a conversion. When we were looking at it, it wasn't. One of the things we had to do was not to do with the Google side itself, but it was our own side, which was to stop people submitting a form on our website, which was our conversion, using a free email domain.
Yeah.
Because nearly all of the spam, in fact, all of the spam was from one of the various free email providers, which may well have some false negatives on it. We may be flushing out some serious business inquiries, but the volume of rubbish we were getting through was just too much. We had to change it.
No response from anybody that you contacted after it. So why the mystery remains. perhaps an R&D project for someone, come up with why people bother filling in a form.
Yeah.
And then not responding. I mean, is it a hobby or something? I don't know.
Maybe they're trying to look for vulnerabilities or something.
Possibly.
We can watch the screen records, can't we, of where the mouse goes, one of these tracking things. Clarity, we talked about that before, great little product from Microsoft. And it's amazing. Sometimes they'll sit for quite a long time trying to fill a form in, even though it says, this form does not accept a Gmail address. And it'll just type another one in. And then do about 1,000 hits on the submit button, even though it won't work.
So, yeah, I suppose.
So that's that. So we've relaunched that with another campaign recently, just trying a tweak on our landing page. We're certainly getting clicks coming through, and not surprisingly, because that's what we're paying for. Yeah. And we're probably about £1,000 into it, aren't we, in the experiment? But we didn't get it to a point where we were training it on stuff we wanted it to do. So we've thought, right, wipe the slate clean, and start again with a new campaign so we can train it on that.
And one of the things I'm doing as well is going through, from the landing page point of view, is being quite disciplined. I've got a spreadsheet running of all changes that we make to the landing pages, putting in all the figures, and also getting screen captures of every design change that we make so that we can actually go back and have a pretty good record as to that worked, that didn't work, we changed that then, we did that then, because it's always great in hindsight wanting to do these things.
So we'll keep the audience updated with our progress on that. I think the next step on that, as well as doing our own campaign for that, is to work with a client with higher transaction volumes and maybe an easier purchase decision, because ours is more of a considered purchase. And then we might be able to see in greater volume how well it works, because you need those 100 conversions, which then triggers the ability to pay per conversion. So we'll get someone to do that with us, and we'll give you an update on that. Okay, that's Performance Max. We've got a few others we want to go through. We've been playing a bit with using LinkedIn, and I mean, everyone uses LinkedIn, but monitoring how it rewards you for different things that you do. So we're looking at things like engagement rates and impressions and reach and that type of stuff. And we've done 2 experiments recently which have proven to be successful. One is to do with this podcast, actually. And every week, Pete and Andy get together and post something on the Wellmeadow company page on LinkedIn to do with the podcast. And you and I obediently repost it to our networks. And that gets a certain number of impressions and engagements. But then we try to, instead of doing that, post it to our accounts directly rather than reposting the Wellmeadow one, even though the wording and the image and the link and everything else is exactly the same. But just coming from our accounts rather than reposting the Wellmeadow one, even though we'd have added comments, has 5 times the amount of engagement and 5 times the number of minutes watched on the ones that are video. So that's
pretty significant.
That's quite significant. So if there's people out there, relying on their marketing department, putting stuff out into the company page and asking everybody to repost it, you can multiply by 5 the effectiveness of that if you get everybody to post.
We were having a bit of a post-match analysis on that as well, weren't we? Thinking just about, do you follow a company versus follow a person? And, that whole dynamic around when people invite you to follow their company, it can be a little bit of a
those. I'm more likely to accept a connection request to a person I feel a connection with than I am a company they've just asked me to follow. And then anyway, like you say, the algorithm isn't serving up as many company page updates anyway. So that's one. And the other one we've learned about is to do with engagement. And I think most people who use LinkedIn will be aware that engagement is triggered by someone clicking on a link, perhaps, or reposting something, or even clicking like on your post. But they are all fairly definite things to do that you probably have to engage a certain bit of your brain to say, I'm now going to proactively react to this thing. Whereas if you put a carousel, and I'm sure people listening will be familiar with it, but if not, go and look at LinkedIn. It's those where you have a kind of a slideshow that goes sideways and you can scroll through it. Just one move, as I understand it, of that slideshow, that carousel sideways, counts as an engagement, counts as a click. So we found that our engagement levels have gone up 5 times again. So if you combine those 2 together, if you now start doing personal posts instead of company posts and you put carousels on instead of just an image, that's 5 times for one, 5 times for the other. We could be 25 times better. Wow.
Do the math.
Just wait for the results to flow in. So I just thought we'd share that because we've been working on that.
It's a good little bit of practical stuff. The other things that we are working on.
This next one you've led on, so this is quite exciting.
Yeah, so we're putting an AI powered chatbot on the website. Yeah.
Now, before people groan and think, oh, there's loads of those, this is actually a bit different to what maybe people have come across before or tried, if they've tried it at all?
Yeah, so it's still early days, but we're training it. Sebastian is the.
Presumably you could choose the name.
I've named the name.
Why did you choose Sebastian?
Because we always had that thing about Sebastian at Wellmeadow, didn't we? It was the kind of the email. So it's
the
always
dummy email
address.
Filtering all the junk.
So Sebastian is now the guardian of the Wellmeadow knowledge base that this AI
Sebastian knows everything.
is being trained on. He doesn't know
have
everything.
Chosen a name really that could be either male or female. Give you a broader reach.
Oh, I could have done. Could maybe have to rename.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Charlie, George, Joe.
You don't want to draw me on this conversation.
No. Carry on. Back to
the plot. So we're training this model at the moment. Feel free to go on the website and ask some questions.
Ask it anything at the moment, anyway.
At the moment, you can learn how to bake a cake and all sorts of stuff, which we're working on trying to refine it so that the knowledge is more focused around what we do, even though we probably are pretty good at baking cakes.
We should probably turn it into the question that you're still answering the question, but with a Wellmeadow spin on it. That's great that you're into baking cakes. Wellmeadow advises startup businesses. If you're thinking of starting up a bakery.
Your R&D for making cakes. So it's an interesting project.
But you train it quite, you're uploading stuff all the time to it into a private space.
Uploading stuff, so we're training it on the website, but even that, there's a way of going through it and filtering out data, redundant data, and how you actually put the whole kind of schema together for how you train the AI is quite important.
Yeah, okay.
The instructions you give it, all that type of thing, and then just thinking around, okay, well, what kind of questions are people asking? How do we train it on that, and those sorts of things. So,
but it's not just the website. You can upload other information that isn't on the website. Yeah.
So Q&As, other stuff we wanted to
upload documents with anything.
Upload documents, brochures, ebooks, all that kind of stuff. So it becomes
transcripts of podcasts.
Yeah. So
we could ask it, which episode was it where Rich said, and it will know
something that he shouldn't have.
It will come up with too long an answer.
So it's quite cool, and it's I guess trying to make it so that it's a bit more engaging.
And there's a number of products bubbling up now that do this sort of thing, but we've latched onto one where we know the creator over in the States, and you're working with him and his coding team to refine it, and that's helping to improve it even better. So that's good. So that's something people can actually try today. Just go to the Wellmeadow homepage.
And in fact, yesterday, this is going to time date this a little bit, but there was the outage of ChatGPT. So you put your post on LinkedIn again, didn't you? That's another LinkedIn little thing. And said, right, if anybody is struggling to use ChatGPT, come to the website, and
our one still works. Because the API was still working, but the chatbot wasn't. Yeah. Well, related to that then is some work I've been doing on private GPT. And we've mentioned this in a previous episode. So this is run by OpenAI, so it's still the same backend, but instead of using the API programmatically, there's a space which looks very similar to ChatGPT, but it's private GPT. So when you give it information, it's only kept for your use, if you like. And like you've just been talking about, you can upload documents, PDFs, Excel, whatever you want to do, and then train it, like you say, get it to read information. So we fantasized, if you like, that how could that be used to effectively write a commentary of financial performance and recommend to the board which subjects they should be discussing. Now, it's still a work in progress, but we're training it gradually when we get some time to have another go at it, and it's getting closer. Certainly, we found that numerical data you really need to upload as Excel or CSV, even though it can read PDFs. It's much more likely to take the data from a more data-rich thing. You have to use the coding module, which is fine. It's just a box you tick, and that works. And then you've got to get it to answer lots of questions to force it to read it in the first place, and then ask it the analysis questions after. But once it's done the first bit, you don't have to do it again. And you build that into the background prompts that get listened to, a bit like the one that you've got on our website. But it's starting to get there. It's still not quite as detailed as I'd like it to be, but I'm getting it to tell me over the last 3 months which cost categories of showing trends which are difficult to explain. So what would you know that? It pulled out something on the balance sheet, actually, which I just hadn't looked at recently, but there was a particular one of our customers that's the day-to-days are stretching a little bit, so we thought, right, better give them a nod. So it's already proved to be a little bit useful because I've done that. And it's at the moment just focused on the financials, but I'm going to expand it out to some HubSpot data and leads and deals, a bit more forward-looking stuff. You might even be able to get it to give you a little bit of a forecast as well.
Yeah.
So that's definitely going on. And one of our clients has asked about that, and he's starting to play with it as well. So certainly encourage people to ask about more.
Yeah, it's almost like having, I suppose years ago, I don't know when it was, probably maybe 10 years ago or so, there was actually a law firm that put a computer on the board, that legally was a legal
no way, right? Really?
member of
Can
the
you
board.
do that?
I think it was in the States, and I don't know if it was to more verify decisions or just have someone on there, but you could see very much the reality crystallizing around having an AI assisting board member who's able to go and look everything up and
well, we've both been in enough board meetings, famously 3,000 or more. Imagine if in that discussion where someone says, I'm not quite sure how many, but wasn't there a time when, or how many times have we done that, or what was the, whatever. Then to have someone having perfect recall and quickly enough that could join in the debate, especially with the new ChatGPT 4.0, which can interact verbally and with images.
Or even that where we touched about on the board meeting podcast around how decisions are made and what you need to consider when you're making decisions. You could almost have, okay, well, actually, have you considered this impact?
Yeah.
Environmental, regulatory, all that type of thing.
Yeah.
So
can forewarn you. Yeah, and if you were to feed it the rationale behind all the decisions you've taken in the past, then it can suggest things in the future. So yeah, and there's loads of applications for that. I was having a chat with some accountants recently on something similar around that. So we'll see where that goes and keep people updated.
Watch this space. Mm-hmm. So the other thing we're working on at the moment is, well, it's kind of a twofold thing, isn't it? It's about how we developed something in HubSpot for email referral schemes. So one of the best ways that you can grow your reach is by growing your email mailing list. However, that's quite hard to do. One way that people do that is by offering referral rewards for forwarding it on and that type of thing. So if you go online and try and, you can find software that will do that for you, but it's quite expensive. But we thought, well, hang on, there must be a way of doing this in HubSpot. And it turns out that there is.
It takes a bit of strangling to get there because it's not all, annoyingly as well, it's very close to being possible entirely within HubSpot, but there's one key step that isn't. So if you give everybody a personalized referral link, which you can definitely do within HubSpot, you send that out by email, they then forward that to our friend, their friend goes on to a HubSpot webpage or any other page with a form on it. And there's a hidden field with the referral link, so they don't get to see it, but that gets returned when they put the details in. All that is definitely possible out of the box. Yeah. And most people using HubSpot could probably work their way around into achieving that. The problem is the field that comes back with the referrer's ID, you can't programmatically easily use that to update the credit for them for having referred. It's just on someone else's record, which is a bit more of a pain. So we've developed using the API, which we've talked about before, a little bit of a back-end program to make that all work. And it does, and it gives the credits and sends out the emails then to say you want a prize and thank you very much for referring Fred Blocks and all that stuff. So it closes the loop. So a combination of native functionality within HubSpot plus a little bit of clever programmability. And what triggered, so that's good anyway, and we can help people with that if they want, if that's interesting. But we thought, let's not keep this API thing the preserve of experts. Could we not just explain to people in nice, easy steps how they could do it as well and make it a bit more accessible to your average user? So we thought we'd try and develop a little explainer. Yep.
So that's SkillSpot is coming soon to a website called Wellmeadow. So it's around looking at how do you actually codify some of this learning into digestible training courses that people can go through and set this stuff up themselves.
And it'll be a mixture of training courses, like you say, just like a traditional course, but also some how-to, step-by-step follow through, almost like a recipe. Yeah. If you want this outcome, don't just learn some principles about it, learn actually how to do it, and we'll step you through, pause the video until you've done that bit, start again, right now do this bit. And it takes a lot longer than you think to write something like that because you're really having to think from first principles everything that you need to explain, which is good discipline anyway. But then the product, I think, is going to be really very useful as long as people want the outcome. So if somebody wants an automated email referral scheme, rather than paying us however much to come and do it for them, they can do it themselves by following the steps.
So, so that's kind of another bit of is it R&D? It's kind of R&D, isn't it? It's sort of.
Well, we've never developed courses before
No.
to productize our knowledge.
Yeah.
So that's R&D, isn't it?
And then we're using a platform called Teachable to be able to host everything.
Mhm.
And so there's a bit of, sort of process R&D, isn't there, as well around it?
Well, and the solution itself that we're
Yeah.
selling the step-by-step guides on, the email referral scheme, that is definitely R&D because it can't be done at the moment without paying for someone else's software.
So
We'll help you develop it in-house. And I think even though we're sort of running to the end of our time, it would be remiss not to mention Magic Minutes, which listeners may well have heard us talk about before, one of our other companies, because that's had a whole bunch of R&D in it, to the point where for years we claimed R&D tax rebates on it and sunk eye-watering amounts of money into. And how many millions have we got in the bank as a result of that at the moment, Mr. Buckle?
not many, as
Many.
in none.
A round number of millions. It earns enough to cover its costs. But as you said the other day, it's actually been a huge benefit to us internally.
Yeah.
Talk about a case for automation.
Yeah, so we used to have somebody employed to manage all of the processes around the meetings.
On the board packs, the agendas, the minutes, the action chasing.
All of that stuff. So it was pretty much a full-time job. But having developed the software to the point where that's largely automated now.
It's entirely
automated. Then, so we've depending on which way you want to look at it, we developed a tool that has automated our own internal process, made our lives massively easier.
Well, easier to scale. I mean, the payback on it is probably 8 to 10 years, the amount it cost us to develop the software. But that was our fault because we kept tweaking with it and we had in-house development teams and so on. You wouldn't do it that way anymore.
No.
We learned the hard way
on that. But I suppose we thought we could commercialize it as well, and that's probably not been the runaway success that we hoped it was.
There's lots of learning on that. And we talked before, haven't we, about doing market research and being careful how you get your data, but finding that product market fit. How many other products do we hear about that sound great, but actually if there's not the market for them at that time, at that price point, and you can't reach them, then no matter how good the product is, if nobody knows about it, well, they're not coming to find it.
And if you've got to educate your market as well, that's incredibly expensive.
Yeah, they call that being at the bleeding edge, don't they? Even one step ahead of the leading edge, you just costs you the money to educate.
Money.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, just in summarising this, how do you create a culture of R&D innovation in your business? I would say one of the key things that we found is that curiosity. You've got to be curious. You've got to want to change things. You've got to want to or be prepared to actually sort of step out your comfort zone a little bit, give something a go, take a bit of time to and discipline to actually see some stuff through.
You do.
Certainly be the case with some of these things. They wouldn't have happened without that discipline to make it happen.
And does that have to be from senior leaders?
I think the senior leaders need to create the space that I think if senior leaders should be leading by example by doing this. But if senior leaders don't create the space, then it's almost seen as an activity where it's what you're wasting your time on type of thing.
Yeah. So if you're a leader of a company at the moment and someone in your organization has got oodles of curiosity and creativity and the skills to implement it or to network with other people that can implement it, then ask yourself, what would your reaction be if you found they'd spent all week developing something that wasn't their day job, but was a bit of a moonshot? Would you challenge them on it and get them back to the day job, in which case you're going to kill it all off? Or do you celebrate it and fan the flames and give them attention and space and potentially resources?
So having that curiosity I think is key, and having that creativity, and by that I don't mean just nice sort of drawings and
fancy ideas.
It's actually about how do we creatively solve a problem that we've got? How do we identify these issues? How do we go about solving them in a way that is a little bit outside the box? And there's so many, as we talked before, there's so many pieces of software out there. How do you stitch that together? That's innovation. That's R&D, and create that culture, because I think that's going to be pretty vital. We talk a lot about when Martin Fagg comes on the podcast about adding value and really doing what you're doing well.
Serve your customers, solve for your customer, focus on your customers all the time.
And to do that, I think increasingly now, you're going to have to really think about, well, how do we innovate? How do we How do we stand out and deliver better than we are, better than our competitors?
And even to grow, because it's still proving very difficult to recruit. And I heard of a company the other day that's actually shedding clients because they couldn't recruit enough people to serve them. They're actually going through the list of clients and deselecting some, sacking the client.
Yeah.
And it just seems so intuitively wrong. And I appreciate every now and again you want to prune some clients you don't want, but these were clients they wanted, but they just couldn't serve all of them, so they had to work out which ones. And that's because they hadn't got enough people, but that's really because they hadn't innovated, automated, come up with better ways of doing things. They're still doing it the old way. And there's a real warning sign there. Other people will fix that. Other people will find a better way of doing it and swallow you up. They'll steal your market or buy you or something.
And maybe you don't need to spend, or maybe you can't afford to spend 20% of the time like Google are. But what about 5% of the time? Well, and I think there's got to be driven by the leadership of the business, driven by the board, to give that freedom to say, innovate in a structured way that the business is aware of, so that everyone's sharing in those ideas and sharing in those kind of solutions, contributing to it. And I think that gives kind of SMEs a real good platform to.
And I would imagine, and I can't prove this, but I would imagine if you did say to everybody 5% of your time could be moonshotty stuff, it probably wouldn't cost you 5% of the salary base. Because if you squeeze the rest of the week down to the 95%, it just becomes maybe inevitably a bit more efficient. People find a way of saying, right, I want to get this done for lunchtime because I've got my afternoon this afternoon is when I've put aside for my moonshot projects and I want to get onto that. So I'm going to get these emails done, get the report written, do whatever I need to do. And so actually you might find you get some of it almost for free just by giving people something exciting to work on that they want to work on.
Well, 5% is 2 hours a week, isn't it? Roughly speaking.
Yeah.
So
half a day a fortnight, 2 hours a week, however you do it. I think you can probably squeeze your normal week's work into the 38 hours or 36 hours or whatever your working week is.
Well, if you stop talking about what you watched on the telly last night,
there
you go. You could have the next idea could be.
You mean actually start working at 9 a.m. when you turn up?
The next idea could be being thwarted by what happened on.
I
don't know.
Love Island,
Coronation Street.
Is that even a thing anymore?
Granny's social history.
You can tell we don't watch much telly, which is why we do so much R&D. Good. Well, there you go. There's quite a lot there. Actually, there's more we could talk about, but they're the good ones that relate to stuff we've talked about before, and we'll no doubt come back to them again.
And we can't talk about the really top secret stuff.
Oh, that one. Don't talk about that. You'll get. I could mention it, but I'll have to shoot you. Good. Well, thank you very much for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. And every week, like I said at the top, we try and come up with new and interesting stuff to talk to you about. And today was a bit of an update and pulling some threads together of various subjects we've covered in previous episodes. Please tell other people that we're here and that it's worth listening to. A number of you are doing that already. Thank you very much. Our listener figures are going up weekly. Thanks for your support. And in the meantime, good luck with your business.